Can I curse on this podcast?
Of course.
Show the fuck up. That's really what it is. Show the fuck up.
Good afternoon, guys. This is Eric LeClaire over at Push Press, and we are continuing our series on In the Trenches. We're looking at leadership through times of crisis. And as you've known, if you followed along our journey, we're bringing a lot of coaches front and center that have had their hand in the development of not only a lot of gyms, but also a lot of brand and coaches. I think it's impressive that these folks have been along the journey or been in business for so long. Back around 2004, maybe even 2005, there was only 2 CrossFits in the Southern California area. And I had a group of folks that I was working with both like in an outdoor boot camp environment. And I grabbed about 9 of the ladies and I said, hey, we're going to go on a field trip. And so I made 2 phone calls, wildly unknown of how I was going to get a response. I called Eddie and down in CrossFit San Diego, and I called this guy named Andy over at what was Petranek Fitness / CrossFit LA. And Andy said, yes, come hang out. I would love to have your team. We put 9 ladies in a truck and we drove all the way out to Santa Monica. And he and at that time, Becca, welcomed us in and said, here's our gym. I can't believe you brought 9 ladies on this Saturday morning or whatever day it was to kind of experience CrossFit at our facility. But we made it a point to travel and meet other coaches. And one thing that stuck out with Andy so long to me was just his passion and his commitment to deliver excellent service. And so when I was challenged with the In the Trenches leadership series, he was on my list for folks to get in touch with. So for those of you guys that don't know Andy, sir, would you introduce yourself?
Well, my name is Andy Petranek, and that's a very difficult question. I much prefer being introduced and then just kind of rolling with it. But yeah, no, I mean, that was great. I've been in the CrossFit world for, God, a long time.
15.
We were one of the first. I mean, it's funny because as people dropped off the list, we kept getting higher up. So I think we maybe started at 14 and then we ended up at like 9 or 8, and now there's no list. So
right.
I don't exactly know where we were, but I've been in the world of really fitness since I was a Marine. Didn't know it at the time, but that was my first. That was the first time I was ever responsible for both my own fitness and the fitness of my men. Being ready for combat, and I didn't know that I was forging a path into the health and fitness world, but I was, and I've been in it ever since. Well, I've been in it. There was a 4-year stint that I wasn't in it. I was in a sales job after the Marine Corps. So now here we are, 2020. Holy shit.
Yeah. Talk about people not necessarily preparing for the worst, but then all of a sudden something like this shows up, and the amount of gyms today. I mean, think back to when we first met. Would you have ever thought there'd be 15,000 plus affiliates, the entire thing called the games, all the business development that is now, business shoot-offs, and then it all comes to a screeching halt because of a virus? Why?
Yeah, no, I could never have written that script. I mean, not in a zillion years. I couldn't have written the script for the growth of CrossFit. I couldn't have written the script for the growth of the games. I couldn't have written the script for the growth of the capacity of an athlete to do what they can do. I mean, I went to the games in 2009, and by 2010, I couldn't have made it. I couldn't have qualified. I mean, like it just went boom. And the whole movement went kaboom. I couldn't have predicted what you see now when you go to CrossFit.com. Like if you don't have kettlebells, use milk jugs. Right. What?
Totally different than what it was.
Yeah. I couldn't have predicted that I would be leading a health and wellness game called the Whole Life Challenge that is changing, has influenced couple 100,000 people over the course of the last 8 years. I would never have predicted that.
Right.
Just,
that's a completely different turn than running CrossFit LA.
Yeah. Yeah.
Man.
Yeah. Pretty amazing.
I was going to say earlier, that was a huge pivot, and you were able to successfully negotiate the brick and mortar in-person service delivery, but then you saw the potential to leverage, obviously through technology, but leverage being able to touch more, do more, deliver more service digitally. What were you paying attention to realize that was the point with which you were able to go digital versus remain face-to-face?
I don't know that I had the wisdom to really think that through. I was just kind of done with my landlord. I was done with the physical space issues. I was done with trainer schedules and figuring out how to make all the systems work together. I just was tired. And I wasn't being the best version of myself anymore. I was not innovating. I was still motivated to serve and help people, achieve what they could in their life. But the way I was doing it just didn't work for me anymore. And when the Whole Life Challenge came around, and when we saw that it was the concept and the way we were running it was like almost an immediate home run for our clients in the gym, and then for the other gyms that we had doing it as teams.
Right.
It was like we can't afford not to keep doing this. It wasn't like, okay, let's go get a couple $1 million and develop an app. It was, the app pulled us. The game pulled us that way. Like I was like, fuck, I can't afford not to do this.
Right. So for those that don't know, the Whole Life Challenge is open to any gym, correct? Do they have to be a CrossFit affiliate, or can it be any gym?
No. It's so not CrossFit. In fact, the first 3 years of doing it, all we had were pictures of our own. We had no marketing materials that were outside of the world of CrossFit. But in terms of percentages of people that were being influenced by and participating in the challenge, I'd say it was 50-50.
Wow.
So and now I'd say a very small percentage of people, they know what CrossFit is. People around the world know what CrossFit is, but it's so not CrossFit based. In fact, it's not really based in anything other than, can I curse on this podcast?
Of course.
Show the fuck up. That's really what it is. Show the fuck up. And yeah. I tell people all the time, I don't give a shit if showing the fuck up means all you're doing is 5 minutes more of something that you couldn't do yesterday. That to me is showing up. If that means, hopefully that's not picking your nose, because I don't know that that's going to move your life forward. But it's something related to what's going to make your life better. If you're committed to walking and you walk 10 minutes longer today than you did yesterday, or you do it more days in a row, or you do it with a little bit of weight like you just got finished doing, or who am I to tell you that I know the best strategy for you? What's the best strategy? The one that's going to work. And right. Here are the 7 categories. We have 7 categories that we lump health and well-being into: sleep, nutrition, exercise, mobility, sleep, hydration, reflection, and well-being practices.
Okay.
Any one of those could lead you. I'm not going to tell you it has to be nutrition. I'm not going to tell you it has to be sleep. I'm going to tell you, pick one that there's what's best for you, and then there's what are you willing to do. And right. The two things are very different.
Of course.
Like I can tell you that you should eat 27 dozen Brussels sprouts a day, and that would be the best thing for you to do. And you tell me, well, Andy, go fuck yourself. I'm not going to do that. Well, right. I'm not going to force them down your throat. So what are you willing to do? And maybe it's not Brussels sprouts at all. Maybe it's I'm willing to get 15 more minutes of sleep. Whoa. Maybe that has a bigger impact than the Brussels sprouts. Maybe right. After you get 15 minutes more to sleep, you're willing to eat a dozen Brussels sprouts instead of 27 dozen just because you had a little bit more rest. Right. So really the Whole Life Challenge introduces some structure and some accountability and some camaraderie and teamwork and coaching around you moving down that path, you finding your way down that path. And when you do it with a team, especially a team that's whether it's a CrossFit gym or a trainer with a bunch of clients, you're guided. You're guided by your coach. And it could be anybody. It could be anybody's grandmother. Like my mom is 85 and she does the challenge. It's not, and she does a good version of it. It's her version, not my version.
Right. Well, that's perfect. I mean, that's a very kind of an unconventional segue into our discussion on leadership principles. You named off 4, of which it sounds like, were you able to take from your time serving? If I'm not mistaken, you were a Marine Corps infantry officer, correct?
I was a combat engineer. Okay.
So you took the leadership requirements to guide, mold, discipline, and support the development of your guys. Did you take anything with you into now the space of coaching and build or develop on top of those principles as you became who you are today, even with Whole Life Challenge?
It's interesting. My definition of leadership always used to be involve leading others, because that's really the context around which I grew up around leadership. I mean, my first introduction to leadership was, I was a musician growing up before I was an athlete or anything else. So I was in orchestras and bands, and it's funny, I never really considered the conductor of the orchestra the leader. I mean, I did, but not the leader in the way we're talking about, right, even though he or she was the leader. But for me, leadership was always about other people. And what I've come to really move into is leadership begins with you. Leadership begins inside. If you can't lead yourself, you have no business standing up in front of anybody else. Right. So if you're, it's kind of like what Jordan Peterson talks about, clean up your closet.
Right. Yep.
If you can't clean up your closet, you have no business telling your next door neighbor how to clean up his front yard or whatever's bothering you about what he does, or your wife or your kids.
Yep.
So, we all have the opportunity to use the traits that you would consider leadership traits of the leader that leads a large group of people: discipline and camaraderie and integrity, and just apply it to ourselves and show up. Just show the fuck up for yourself.
I take it.
And if you're not doing that, you don't stand a chance. It'll fall on deaf ears.
I think that's a massive indication as to what's going on today during this crisis moment, is that those that were in leadership roles, either they bought their way in or they were given their way to the top, whether we're talking affiliate owner or head coach, never held themselves to a standard, but yet now in this time of crisis, they're expected to lead their team through this, and they're incapable or they're not willing to show up to solve the problems. Yeah. Have you seen reflections of that, or have you seen some gyms go down recently? Any stories of?
I don't have any personal stories about gyms failing. Kenny Kane bought CrossFit LA for me in 2015.
Right.
And it's now called CrossFit LA. It's also called Oak Park. That was his mom's gym that burned down in fires up in Northern California several years ago. So we renamed the gym that, and he just moved into a new space. I mean, literally like 2 months ago, and he's still doing well. The community's doing well. They're showing up. He's serving his people. Now, the longer we go, the harder that gets. But Kenny is a true leader. Kenny has done the work. His life has been around improving himself, improving his body, improving his showing up with integrity, showing up with service, showing up for his coaches. He leads by example. And, that's really what the world needs. People can align around that right now. And it's
what's significantly missing. There are, like I said before, there are folks that are in that leadership title, but haven't walked the walk, developed themselves. And as we've seen, they're struggling. They're absolutely struggling.
Well, it's not even something that led prior to the coronavirus. We almost, like when I vote for a leader, for whether it's president or whatever it is, I hadn't really ever thought about, well, what do we do in a case of a disaster? Like that's all, because we're not in that context. Who cares? It doesn't even matter. That is going to change radically, not just in this coming election, but in elections for the next 20 years. Because that absolutely matters.
So I'm of the belief that you just haven't had this golden ticket handed to you, that you've learned along the way, and that even your best days at CrossFit LA didn't make such that the whole life was so easy. So You looked back now, hindsight 2020, what were some of the biggest challenges that you had to dig deep and show up for yourself?
Well, probably the biggest one that I've had the most recent revelations about, what I've come to figure out, I've pieced together after I had some significant meltdowns last year. Well, I'll just tell you what happened. We had a drop off in enrollment in the Whole Life Challenge. For a lot of reasons, one of which is everybody and their grandmother has a goddamn challenge. They don't even have to be paid for challenges. They're just, everybody has their own challenge. I'm going to do fingertip push-ups with one hand behind my back challenge for 3 weeks. Create a Facebook group and do that challenge, So not only we're not competing against businesses, we're competing against everybody that has a challenge. And I just made that mean a lot of bad shit about myself. Like I turned that into evidence. The dropping of attendance and the dropping of revenue and the losing of people in our company. And I started to make some really shitty decisions, emotional decisions out of fear and worry and anxiety. And as that continued to happen, my own internal calm, peaceful, joyful state that has been almost my entire life was eroding. And then all of a sudden I had a panic attack. And then I had another panic attack. And then then it was anxiety. Like I didn't even know what a panic, I knew on the surface what a panic attack was because I've coached people who've said they've had panic attacks, but I didn't get what that was. Like this was like a trap door opened up in my life and I suddenly found myself falling and I had nothing to hold on to. And there was a point at which I was really scared to leave my house. I mean, it was summertime. We were going on a trip. I was thinking I wasn't going to be able to go. I didn't know how that was going to happen. And one of the things that I learned, it's funny, I've done some, I must have learned this in another part of my life because I must have operated this way, especially as a Marine, but I just started to chunk it down into these really small pieces. Like I might not be able to get my head around 2 weeks, but I can certainly get my head around the next 10 minutes.
Yep.
So, okay, what can I do? What can I do for the next 10 minutes? How can I succeed and win the next 10 minutes? Okay, I can do that.
Yep.
And then I can do 10 minutes after that. And then I can do 10 minutes after that. And I just did that and I kept my head down and I've made it till now. I'm still making it, but
that's a
that
power
was really, really, really
to share for folks because through our work with Push Press, we deal with hundreds and hundreds of gym owners and their coaching staff, and a significant portion of them they raise their hand and they get involved publicly in discussions, but then privately they Facebook or Instagram message and they're like, "Man, I'm scared." They won't write that publicly, but they'll send it in a text, they'll send it on a Facebook message, and that's where their real emotion shows up. Fear, uncertainty, they're like trapped in slow motion, And what you said was absolutely correct. They can't look 2 weeks down the road, but what can they do now? What can they successfully negotiate and succeed in today? And for those that haven't heard that message before, that's going to be powerful. That's going to be absolutely brilliant for them, because how much longer? I mean, we just listened to Newsom yesterday drop the idea that now gyms, whatever that is defined as, is phase 3 for California, and it's months, not weeks. So does that mean all of our friends that own and operate facilities here in California need to like hunker down for May, June, July? Does this go August, and what happens, So besides that strategy, you've pulled yourself up, you've pulled yourself out, you've turned around a little bit. If you had to deliver any bit of wisdom in all the years you've been working with clients, working on business, through business, developing businesses, developing coaches, and very personally and authentically sharing a big piece of your authentic self, what would you share to struggling coaches today if you had to give them a bit of advice?
Well, it's certainly what we just talked about.
Okay.
And I think really remembering that it's not the circumstances. Your power comes from inside of you. And you can take two people, put them in the same circumstances, and one can come out absolutely fine and unscathed emotionally, internally, and the other one can be a complete mess. Like, my business partner wasn't going through what I went through when all this shit was happening.
Right.
So what's the difference? Well, the difference is not in the circumstance. The difference is in how we think inside about the circumstance and what we make it mean to ourselves, right? It's our own self-judgment, self-evaluation of what we're doing. And guess what? The brilliant and beautiful thing is we might not be able to control the circumstances, but we can control how we think. And we can control how we feel based on how we think. So if you can... Look, circumstances are what they are. They just are what they are. You may not believe or feel like you're going to make it through, but your chances of making it through in a more stable, powerful way will be significantly increased if you can accept what is and work on changing your thoughts, because your thoughts will then change your feelings. If you're feeling, you start going down the road of the what ifs. I mean, this is where I was. You start going down the road of what if. Suddenly I'm homeless on Venice Boulevard, living in a homeless shelter with underneath a bridge. And I've got no wife, I've got no family, I have no kid, I'm just, and then I'm shooting up drugs, and then I'm dead, And I can shift that by changing my thinking,
right?
And the way I think and the way I piece together, my feelings will change based on how I'm thinking. So it's start to play with that, and literally it's what's going on inside that's the upsetting part, not the circumstance.
Right.
You are not a victim of your circumstance, ever.
Yeah, I think that's a message that is so often lost on folks. Hey, you made a mention earlier that you do one-on-one coaching, and I'm wondering, is it one-on-one coaching for the fitness side, or do you do like business mentorship, and do you coach coaches?
That's really all I do now. I don't do any fitness coaching. I mean, it's not that I can't, because I do have some clients who need some, accountability work or some programming work or some things that relate to their fitness. And of course I have years of experience, so I'm not going to not do that. But most of the coaching work that I do now is life coaching, business coaching, health coaching, leadership coaching. I work with executives. I work with individual people. I work with businesses. And it's a small, very select group of people that I maintain, like in my client base, because I'm also doing the Whole Life Challenge. But
Right.
it's really important for me to maintain that connection with the individual person and people, because when I don't, I tend to allow the numbers to collapse into they're just numbers, like likes and thumbs ups and all the things that go into building a big audience. And I forget that every like is a person with a life, with a family, with the kids. And that was one of my big revelations last year, connecting with the humanity of people. So that's a long way of saying.
Well, I was going to say that's oftentimes in the entrepreneurial push of grow, business. We sometimes forget that the fabric of that are real people, like real, tangible humans, husbands, wives, kids, families, whatever matter. How can people reach you? For those that appreciated listening and they stuck on today and they're paying attention, they're taking notes, how can they find you?
Well, wholelifechallenge.com is Whole Life Challenge. And there's another website called that is business.wholelifechallenge.com. So if you have a business or you're running a gym and you want to do an online program, I can't really think of a better online program to be running right now with your community than Whole Life Challenge, because you can do it. You can do it and you can still coach your people through the challenge. I'm at Andy Petranek basically everywhere. Facebook. I do a lot of Facebook Lives. I do a lot of I do a daily meditation at 8:30 in the morning Pacific time every day. I do a workout, a body weight workout 3 days a week. I'm pretty accessible. Just do a search for Andy Petranek. I'm not on Instagram very much. Most of my stuff on social is on Facebook and the Whole Life Challenge.
Excellent. Right on. Well, man, I sincerely appreciate your time. We will catch up here in a second, but if there's anything that we can do for you, both at Push Press or down the road, by all means, do not hesitate to reach out. I know a lot of folks, they're down literally in their own trenches working, trying to solve this dilemma here locally in California. Each state will be different. But I really hope that folks do lean on your message and kind of tap you if there is some help that they need, for sure. So thank you. I sincerely appreciate your time today.
Sure, thank you.
Are watching at home in the trenches, share. Feel free, give us a thumbs up, give us some reflections in the comments are helpful because we go back and we read that. So if I catch some questions from you guys and Andy doesn't see it, I'll be more than happy to shoot those questions over to him in the coming days. Thank you. Dude,